This cop was found planting evidence in this man's car. This defund the police activist, who took donations to work on full transparency for police interactions with the general public, decided to fund himself instead. And this fraud queen, who was operating a giant Ponzi scheme under the guise of animal rescue, finally got sentenced. Who are some more people we need to kick out of society in our ever-growing list? Let's find out, starting with number 6. Planting charges. In March of 2018, a guy named Jason Serrano was still recovering from a prior injury and barely able to stand upright when he became the target of NYPD officers Kyle Erickson and Elmer Pastran. The officers had pulled over Serrano and his friend for an alleged broken taillight, something they couldn't have seen from their original position, and what followed was a cascade of events so ridiculous that it almost sounds fake. Claiming the car reeked of that skunk smell cops know and love, the officers ordered Serrano, who wasn't even driving, and the driver to step out. When Serrano protested being searched, explaining he had fresh surgical staples, Erickson and Pastran's response wasn't exactly heartwarming. They shoved him to the ground and handcuffed him. As Serrano curled up in pain on the sidewalk, the officers began their investigation. And by investigation, we mean the apparent planting of evidence caught on their very own body cameras. Erickson's meticulous initial search of the vehicle turned up nothing. Until, magically, after several sweeps, a small bud of that one plant somehow materialized in the drink holder that they didn't see the first 5 times they looked at it. How lucky for the officers that Erickson's flashlight revealed the plant in places he had just searched, right? And of course, he made sure to loudly announce that he smelled a bit of it as he fiddled with the newly discovered evidence. The icing on the corrupt cake was a celebratory fist bump between Erickson and Pastran once they wrapped up their charade. Classy. Body cam footage later revealed damning evidence of their misconduct, but that didn't help Serrano initially. Prosecutors withheld the video for months, leaving Serrano with no choice but to plead guilty to resisting arrest to avoid jail. The really annoying thing about the situation is that it wasn't a one-off thing. Kyle Erickson had a history of discrepancies related to substance seizures, including a similar incident weeks earlier where he allegedly planted more of the plant during another traffic stop. Despite video evidence, multiple internal reviews by the NYPD's Internal Affairs Division cleared Erickson of any misconduct. Because why wouldn't they? It's almost as if the public can't trust agencies to investigate themselves. Which is just crazy talk, right? It's not like they don't have an obvious conflict of interest or anything. It took years for the footage to surface, but when it finally did, Serrano's conviction was overturned. Erickson, instead of being held accountable for being a dirty cop, just quietly retired, while Pastran remains on extended leave. As of the release of this video, federal authorities, including the FBI, have launched an investigation into allegations of the planting of evidence by the officers, and Serrano filed a civil lawsuit against the city of New York, Erickson, and Pastran. Despite these steps toward justice, Serrano's arrest record continues to linger online for everyone to see, while the officers who violated his rights are shielded by years of inadequate oversight and the now repealed 50A. The reason to be outraged here is simple. Body cameras are pointless if the evidence they capture is buried. Investigations drag on for years, and misconduct is covered up by the department. The last thing this country needs is more corrupt cops bending the rules for their own interests. Number 5. Transparent fraud. Here's a delightful tale of hypocrisy served with a side of Cancun margaritas. Brandon Anderson, an anti-police activist and founder of Rahim AI, which was a chatbot that helps the public monitor police interactions, allegedly decided that the best way to fight for police transparency was by being as opaque as possible with $75,000 in donations. We know, you'd never expect an activist to be shady, right? And yet, here we are. It's almost becoming a cliche. According to the DC Attorney General, Anderson raided his nonprofit's funds to bankroll luxury vacations, high-end shopping sprees, and even a clothing allowance that would make a fashion influencer blush. Because who needs oversight when you've got Gucci? Raheem AI was supposed to create an app to help people bypass 911 and connect with community responders instead of the police. An interesting idea, until you consider that the project flopped spectacularly while Anderson allegedly funneled money into penthouse rentals and designer goods. Oh, and let's not forget the $5,000 spent on emergency vet services. At least someone's little precious ball of fuzzes needs were met. Meanwhile, Jasmine Banks, the nonprofit's sole employee, claims she hasn't seen her paycheck in months and was forced to sign an illegal non-compete clause. So she blew the whistle, but apparently the nonprofit's board didn't feel like holding anyone accountable. After all, it's hard to implement oversight when there's no treasurer. And of course, Anderson himself hasn't responded to requests for comment. Perhaps he's too busy on another business trip to Cancun or indulging in a luxury shopping spree. As for Raheem AI, it's not an actual AI, just a branding choice. It aimed to provide an alternative for people who don't trust emergency services for minor issues. That said, the idea faced significant challenges from the start, not least because community responders would lack proper emergency training. Combine that with the absence of financial oversight and an app that never materialized, and it's no surprise the concept fell apart, and Anderson just decided to ride that horse off a cliff. Seriously, can we be done with these shady activists? Number 4, overreacting dad or overreacting cops. Imagine this. You call 911 because your child has been taken by her mother who's struggling with substance misuse. You're panicked, desperate, and expecting the police to step in and help, something the police are supposed to do. Instead, Darnay Cockrell found himself starring in a real-life demonstration of how to turn a crisis into a fiasco, courtesy of the Mesa Police Department. Cockrell, 52, called emergency services around 6 a.m., reporting that his 4-year-old daughter had been taken from his apartment by her mother. According to Cockrell, the mother had visited the night before and stayed overnight. The next morning, he asked her to leave, but she refused. At some point, though, he stepped into another room, and she grabbed their daughter and bolted without him knowing. Panicked, Cockrell called 911, and the dispatcher told him to try to figure out where they had gone. While attempting to do so, he encountered an officer, and from here, things went off the rails. Instead of receiving assistance, Cockrell was told to sit down on the curb. He refused because he was understandably frantic about his missing child, and things escalated faster than a Karen flipping out over her son's made-up gluten allergy. The officer, who was apparently fresh out of the academy with a shiny 2 months of solo patrol experience, interpreted Cockrell's refusal as some sort of imminent threat. So he calls for backup, because he can't have a panicked father not sitting on the curb. And soon, a second officer arrives. Then, in a scene that feels like the setup for a bad cop show, they wrestled Cockrell to the ground and slapped on the cuffs. A bystander recorded the whole outrageous ordeal, which of course went viral. Nothing screams, "We're here to serve and protect," like manhandling the guy who called them for help. Mesa PD defended their officers, saying Cockrell's high level of emotion raised safety concerns, because it makes more sense to focus on the dad panicking over his missing child instead of more important things such as finding the child in question. After detaining Darnay Cockrell, the officers located his daughter and safely returned her to him. The child's mother, Nicole Connor Sharp, was arrested and booked for disorderly conduct under a DV law. Following the incident, a bystander's video of Cockrell's detainment went viral on social media. In the footage, Cockrell was seen wearing his company's shirt. Subsequently, he was laid off from his job. The company attributed the decision to cutbacks, but you can't help but feel a little suspicious, right? Naturally, the department cleared itself of any wrongdoing, though it admitted the officers could use supplemental training. Yeah, we'd say so. We do understand that when an officer gives you a command, you need to comply with that command, whether you agree with it or not. But we also think it's really important for officers to understand the context of a situation. This guy's daughter was missing and was taken by her junkie of a mother. As a parent, if you're not losing your mind in a situation like that, there's something wrong with you. If it was us, that cop would have been lucky to even get 2 coherent words out of us, let alone a complete sentence. Number 3, the aggressive arrest. It took 3 years for Officer Gonzalo Zendejas to face a single charge of misconduct under the color of authority after being caught on video punting a 17-year-old suspected shoplifter in the face. The incident went down back in June of 2021 at a Glendale, California sporting goods store and didn't just involve Zendejas. It featured a whole group of plainclothes and uniformed officers, aka grown-ass men, piling on the teen like some kind of weird team-building exercise. In footage from the scene, multiple officers are seen pinning the kid to the ground. As if that wasn't excessive enough, Zendejas then stormed in and delivered some completely unnecessary force to the boy's face. Despite the video evidence, it took years for any action against Zendejas. And even as of the release of this video, he's the only officer still on leave. The others involved in the incident, who were also seen using force, have quietly returned to duty as if nothing ever happened. The message is clear. Accountability within the system is optional. This type of behavior does more harm than these cops seem to realize. It wholly undermines the public trust in law enforcement and leaves many communities questioning whether they're being protected or targeted. Misconduct like this isn't just about one officer. It's a symptomatic of a deeper problem in how such cases are handled. As of the release of this video, the department insists their investigation is ongoing. But the 3-year delay in bringing up any charges at all shows an obvious lack of urgency in addressing this blatant use of excessive force. It's like the department can't even pretend like it cares. Guys, at least feign outrage. Make us feel better. At this point, it's almost as if they're just rubbing everyone's noses in it. Number 2, hoop dreams. Scammers have devised a clever way to con well-meaning New Yorkers, and unfortunately, it's working all too well. Over $76,000 has been stolen in a growing citywide scam involving fake basketball team donations. The NYPD has identified at least 39 cases in Manhattan and Brooklyn in 2024, and the numbers are climbing. Here's how it works. Scammers approach you asking for donations for their struggling basketball team. They'll ask to use your phone to input their information or accept payment through apps such as Zelle or Venmo. While one person distracts you with conversation, the other quickly transfers money out of your account. It's a simple trick, but devastatingly effective. Even former Miss New York USA Brianna Siaka fell victim. After agreeing to donate, she handed over her phone, only to discover later that $2,000 had been transferred without her knowledge. The lesson here is clear. Never hand your phone to a stranger. It might feel rude or overly cautious, but your phone holds access to your most sensitive information, including banking apps. Once someone else has it, even for a few moments, they can cause serious damage. If you're moved to donate, it's best to research an organization first. Legitimate charities or school teams will have proper documentation and structured ways to accept donations. Random strangers on the street shouldn't be your go-to for charitable giving, no matter how convincing their story. And yes, we realize that many of these legit organizations are shady as well, but at least with them, there's some level of accountability. If it's some kid hitting you up in a parking lot, you're probably getting scammed. Stay alert, trust your instincts, and keep your phone in your own hands. A little caution now can save you from a lot of regret later. Number 1, Animal Rescue Ponzi. Remember Johanna Michele Garcia, the self-proclaimed Mother Teresa of South Florida, who turned out to be more of a financial Grim Reaper? Garcia had run a nearly $200 million Ponzi scheme disguised as an investment company, MJ Capital Funding. Well, she's back in the spotlight, this time with a shiny new 20-year prison sentence. So, the ringleader of an infamous $200 million Ponzi scheme just got handed the maximum punishment. Let's unpack this mess. Garcia was once the poster child for community success, running MJ Capital Funding, which claimed to help small businesses through merchant cash advances. In reality, it was all smoke and mirrors. Investors were promised ridiculous returns of over 100% annually, but their money wasn't going to small businesses. It was going into Garcia's pockets, flashy expenses, and payouts to earlier investors to keep the scam afloat. The whole thing came crashing down in 2021 when the SEC caught wind of Garcia's operation. But instead of learning her lesson, Garcia kept the schemes rolling, even while being investigated and from behind bars. It probably wasn't the best idea, but hey, the Ponzi Queen's gonna Ponzi, you know? After pleading guilty to charges of wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy, it was clear she wasn't getting away with anything. Her co-conspirator, Pavel Ramon Ruiz Hernandez, got 9 years for his part, but as the mastermind, Garcia was in a league of her own. With no one above her to blame or bargain against, prosecutors went all in, and the court agreed. In total, over 2,000 investors lost nearly $90 million in the scam. Some have been able to recover a fraction of their money through a settlement with Wells Fargo, but the damage was done. One investor, devastated after losing $50,000 meant for his nonprofit, Animal Care Now, said he was glad that at least she wasn't going to be able to hurt anyone else. He thinks, since she was still running scams during her investigation, so it's not like prison is going to stop her, but we can hope. As of the release of this video, Garcia's got 20 years to sit and reflect on her choices. She went from being a celebrated businesswoman to running multiple fraud schemes even after MJ Capital went down. It's almost impressive how far she was willing to go, but not in a good way. We never really understand why people run Ponzi schemes. They never work. If you run one, you're inevitably going to get caught. There's no exit strategy, just a ticking clock. Also, the promised returns of 100% should have been a massive, brightly colored red flag to anyone with even a bit of investment knowledge. Ponzi schemes are built on lies and illusions, and as Garcia's case shows, they always crumble under their own weight. The only guarantee is that someone, eventually, will pay the price, and it's usually everyone involved. Click to watch one of these next videos.